Recently, and by recently I mean like 8 months ago, I moved to an island in the South Pacific and have gotten the hiking bug. I try to get out and go to new locations as much as I possibly can, what with work eating into my precious time. This happened about 2 weeks ago. Since I live in the South Pacific region, it gets mighty hot, driving all but the most insane hikers indoors unless it's night. Of course, I'm not a masochist, so I try to do all my hiking in the early hours of the morning, or in the evening when it starts getting cool. I've never been afraid of going hiking by myself. I did it when I lived in Oregon, and never ran into any problems with it. But this island isn't my friendly home state. I always carry pepper spray, and when I used to go hiking in Montana and Wyoming, would sometimes carry a handgun to ward off anything I couldn't take on, whether it was a bear or a person. But I've always gotten off considerably lucky. I got to the trailhead at about 6:30 in the evening. The trail was called 1,000 Steps, but in all honesty it was mostly just a walk straight down to the cliff and then a grueling journey back up. I didn't want to go, but my dog Mad Moxie needed to be walked, and I had done the hike so many times I could probably do it in my sleep. The first thing I noticed when I pulled up was an old, rickety, rusted-out blue pickup truck with a plastic tarp over the bed to keep out the rain. These are pretty common on the island, affectionately earning them the name Guam Bombs. I didn't think much of it as I hooked up Moxie and started heading down the trail, trying my best to ignore the mosquitoes that were making a meal out of my exposed neck. Heading down the trail was relatively easy. Avoiding the banana spiderwebs, I felt the stress of my day slowly unwind as the underbrush grew darker and night approached. I made it all the way down to the water's edge when I noticed a man standing about 100 yards away. It was dark enough by now that I could only see his silhouette, so I have no idea if he was looking at me or at the water, but I chose to ignore him and pull Moxie's ball from my backpack. I threw it for her a few times to get all of her wiggles out. After some time, the man started walking over to me and stopped maybe about 10 feet away. Now, I'm not a tiny wife of a woman. I'm 23 years old, and I stand about 5'6". This guy was only a couple of inches taller than me, but most of the locals were on the smaller side. Still, something about him just felt weird. "Evening," I greeted as he nodded and looked down at Moxie. She had just returned from running after her ball. I stooped down to pet her now sweaty head as the man kept his eyes trained on my dog. "Can I help you, sir?" "Pretty dog," he responded mildly. "You alone?" "I have my dog." I said this, trying to sound braver than I was feeling. I'm never alone. I tried to emphasize on the fact that I had my dog with me, but the man seemed unfazed by my statement. "Oh, all right. Have a good night." With that, he turned around and started walking back towards the trailhead. I watched his shadow disappear into the trees and waited for about half an hour before I too started walking back towards the path. My mind was on high alert as Moxie pulled me through the trees and up the cliffside. The crickets pierced the night as I climbed the steps, illuminated by my flashlight. My hands were full with Moxie's leash and my light, but you could bet your buns I would have pepper spray out if I had an extra hand. Finally, my light pierced the trees at the top, and I practically booked it up the hill. When I got to the top, I nearly shat myself. The rusted blue pickup truck was sitting in the parking lot still, but their passenger side door was practically touching my car's driver's side. Inside the car, I could faintly see 2 men sitting in the cab, and I could feel them watching me. Slowly, I approached my car, walking as far over to the passenger side as I could, and kept Moxie with me close as I opened the door and crawled over to the driver's side. At that moment, the door of the pickup truck flew open, and my dog started going apeshit. She was barking at the 2 people, who were now outside of their car and trying to break into mine. Heart in my chest, I rammed the keys into the ignition and tore out of the parking lot so quickly I nearly took my mirror off. I called my mom as soon as I got home, and she begged me to call the police. Unfortunately, the police here on island aren't as vigilant as they are on the mainland, and the area is known for car thefts, mugging, and other debaucheries. I learned that from my coworkers later that week. Earlier this month, another girl actually disappeared from that area without a trace, and it makes me wonder if the men in the blue pickup truck didn't have something to do with it. If I hadn't had Moxie with me, would I have been mugged, or maybe something worse? If I learned anything from this experience, it's that for my lady hikers, please always take pepper spray with you. Go hiking in groups, and always let someone know where you're going. It might just save your life someday. I did call the cops about the missing female in the truck I saw, and they said they would investigate into it, but so far I haven't heard anything back. I fear for this woman's life, and realize how easily it could have been my own. So I saw an article on here earlier, which gave me flashbacks to an encounter of mine that I wanted to share. To give you an idea of where I'm from, I grew up in a nice middle-class neighborhood in Maryland, about 15 minutes from the border to DC. We never had any serious crimes in our neighborhood, and just the typical petty theft from people leaving their car doors unlocked. It was a cloudy, chilly Saturday in October of 1993. I was 8 years old, and my brother James was 12. We had just left his friend's house after playing street hockey on his driveway for hours, and we had to get back home around 5:30 p.m. His house is a couple of blocks away from the elementary school, and basically across the street from the school was a pretty big-sized park. Its entrance has a fence with a path that separates the fence. Along the street, the fence continues into a backyard to a house, which sits on a cul-de-sac. My brother and I, on the left side, approached the four-way stop sign and noticed a white 1990 Toyota Camry sitting there. We didn't think anything of it and walked down the sidewalk towards the school. I was talking to him about Art Monk, the Redskins, and how we could use the Beckett to ride to the stadium and hope to get an autograph. I realized James was oddly quiet during my idea about riding to the Redskins. I asked him if he was listening, and he said, "Keep talking. Act cool, act normal, just don't look back, okay?" Confused and nervous, I responded, "Okay, what's going on?" During my talk, my brother was paying attention to the Camry that was driving very slowly behind us. We played it cool, walked our normal pace, just about to pass the school. I continued my talk while we were approaching a big field that sits directly across the entrance of the park. My brother put his hand on my chest, which made me stop immediately. He turned back and glanced at the driver. Now I wasn't sure if it was to see how the car would act, if he wanted to make a move across the street into the park, or if he was trying to see a license plate. However, when we stopped, the car stopped, and this time I got a good look. And the driver was a female, brunette hair to the shoulders. She almost looked drugged. She never blinked, she just looked straight ahead. Not at us, not to the side, just straight ahead. The passenger, though, was the intimidating one. He was red-headed with long hair, and had this angry look. His eyes were watching us intently. After getting a good look and realizing the situation we were in, I started to get nervous. I was breathing heavily, my legs felt numb, and I looked at my brother. He just yelled, "Keep walking." What was weird about this day? There weren't any cars on the road. It felt like a ghost town all of a sudden. It was just us and them. We continued walking towards the next block when the car all of a sudden started merging into the other lane. He was going to block us off, and then who knew what? My brother, being older than me, was faster than me. He knew it, and I knew it too. Staring straight ahead and looking at our options, my brother said, On the count of 3, run, okay? Run as fast as you can and follow me." Before I could even accept, he started his countdown. He's off running, and I'm trying to keep up. And the car slams on the accelerator. James is able to run across the street. When I try to do the same, the car almost cuts me off, and I can feel the bumper against my pants. And the Camry now has to back up and accelerate again after us. My brother made the move across to the right side of the street, and I followed as fast as I could. I realized he was making a run for our friend's house. He gets there and is ringing the doorbell, banging like crazy. And the Camry catches up, and the passenger gets out of the car. But as soon as he does, my dad's friend opened the door. James rushed in, and the redhead got back in his car while I dived through the open door. My friend's dad came out running towards the car speeding off, yelling something as he tried to get the license plate. I'm crying, my brother's crying, and my friend's dad is shaken up. Even though we live a block away, we had our dad come pick us up. We called the police, wrote a report, and they said they'll keep their eyes open. On Monday, we notified the elementary school about our ordeal. However, they didn't do much to let the public know. It wasn't until next week that they sent out a flyer to the rest of the parents, and cops began to finally patrol the neighborhood. See, during the week, 3 other cases happened with that white Camry following children. One was even more terrifying than our experience, because the kids were jumping through backyards and the redhead was chasing them through the park. After that week of disturbances, everything stopped. I never heard of an arrest. I don't know if they moved on to another city or state to try and abduct kids. All I know is that they terrified our neighborhood that year, and it took a little while for things to get back to normal. The brunette, I always wondered what her role was. Why would she participate in this terrorizing, menacing act? Either way, her face and that ugly, nasty redhead man are etched into my brain. This happened when I was in my teens, around 16 or 17. For background, I live in the UK. At this age, I lived in a pretty average area, but you only had to walk 20 minutes out, and you were in some pretty dodgy areas that were well known for their level of crime and general bad behavior. Myself and my friend of a similar age, both females, were walking to a park that was about 40 minutes away to meet the rest of our friends, all the same age and gender. To get to this park, we had to briefly dip into one of these bad areas, almost on the edge of the worst part of the estate. This was at around 6-ish p.m. and was during the lead up to winter. So it wasn't dark, but the streetlights were on and it was coming into the evening. We were walking along a pathway with my friend on the outside by the bush, which continued into an open field, and me on the inside by the road. Just a normal 2-way flowing street. We were giggling away, oblivious to almost everything a teen should be thinking about, when out of nowhere, this black car sped towards us from behind. The sound alerted us as the tires screeched towards us. The car aligned itself with us while we were still walking, this guy literally hanging out of the passenger side window reaching for me. He was about 1 foot away from actually touching me. As I look up to see his face, he's wearing this terrifying mask. The ones with the huge animated smiles like out of The Purge, if anyone's seen that. Once I finished screaming and managed to process what was happening, I just remember grabbing my friend's arm and bolting into the field that was to the left of us. We'd just reached the entrance. Probably wasn't the smartest idea, but I just wanted to get away from the road at this point. My fight or flight had kicked in. It suddenly felt a lot darker with no lights in the open field. We stayed close to the bush where the path was on the other side, but were crouching behind so they couldn't see us. They never actually stopped, just slowed down passing us, reached out, and sped off. But we could hear the revving and over-acceleration in the distance. We tried to calm each other down, and eventually convinced each other there was just a stupid prank, and probably a young group of lads just out to scare people. After about 10 minutes, we decided to carry on heading towards our friends. You could walk through this field, as it was in fact a shortcut which we decided to take. We were clearly not any safer by the lit road. We made it to the rest of our friends safe, but 3 had already gone home, and so another 2 joined us. There were 4 of us altogether. The park was quite small, and there weren't any other people around, so we all decided to go and get some cheesy chips from the chip shop about 5 minutes away. My friend and I were filling in our friends by the masked men, and the whole event. They were super freaked out. We couldn't make this up. We're about 30 minutes away from where it initially happened, and you can guess what happened next. We were walking in pairs since it was a small pathway, when again me and my friend heard the sound of screeching tires. We shot a look backwards, and there, sure as shit, was a black Vauxhall Astra, or whatever it was, and a group of men in the car. I got a good look this time, and it became clear that they were grown men, not boys. They were well built, tall, and the driver had a beard that was protruding from under his mask. I shouted to my friends to run as fast as they could. I just knew this was more than a prank. We were running when the car aligned itself with us again, and 2 men, one hanging out the passenger side window and the other out the back passenger window, reached out with their masks on and tried to grab those nearest to the road. All the while, the men in the car were screaming this ridiculous laugh. They were all psychos laughing at our fear. There was no bushes to hide behind this time, and we stopped to hopefully let the car pass so we could run across the road in time and straight for the chippy. It passed. We turned to run across. It stopped and started reversing towards us at high speed. It missed us only by inches. I just remember running for my life, feeling like these men were really out to do damage, and at this point I didn't look back until we reached the chip shop. All 4 of us made it. From here, we all rang our parents in hysterics, telling them about what had just happened. All the while, this black car still sat in view, revving the engine. At this point, all of them had their masks on, slowly tilting their heads side to side, showing off the huge grins on their masks. They were waiting for us to leave the chip shop. We explained it to the guys behind the counter, and they told us to wait for our parents. After about 5 minutes, the car sped off, and our parents arrived full of wise words and reassurance. I don't know what they were doing, whether they were out to scare us or actually hurt us. The reversing suggests the latter. I don't know why they chose us, and I also don't know if they terrified other people that night too. I just won't ever forget the masks and the malicious laughing and chasing. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here, as always. I just wanted to thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed the video, please feel free to leave feedback in the comments below, as well as perhaps like, share, or subscribe if you feel so inclined. If you have a personal story that you'd like to submit, or you'd like to just send me a message, links to all of my social media will be in the description for the video below. This includes my Gmail, Twitter, and Facebook accounts. Go ahead and send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please be sure to include in the tagline what the theme of the story is, if it has any, the name of the story, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you're curious at all about the music used in this video, the music is always listed in the description below, in the order which it appears. I also have links to the artists and list the tracks by name, just in case you want to find more of their work. Last but not least, if you have any criticism, please be sure to leave it in the comments below, as I'm always looking for new ways to improve the channel. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.